Hello and welcome. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, and today I'm going to do a deep dive into the lunar eclipse, which occurs on the 4th and 5th of July, depending where you are in the world, and it's in the sign of Capricorn. Now, as ever, I've created a day chart based on universal central time for the event, and that's going to give us an opportunity to see not just the impact of the eclipse itself, but also the wider impact of the way all the planets and key positions are knitting together to provide a very big backdrop for the time that this eclipse is in effect. If you're new to my channel, I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. You can also chat to me directly on Twitter at HoroscopeAce. You're very welcome. Also, please feel free to make any comments under this video. I answer every single one. And you can join Elisa and I for the daily astrology and tarot video show, which is proving great fun. Really popular. You can grab yourself your free daily horoscope every single day. Please see the link beneath this video too. Now, if you're newer to more serious astrology and more conscious of your zodiac sign, but you're intrigued to go beyond that, please see my affordable range of reports below. You can grab yourself a year's forecast and a character analysis based on your unique birth data and get 30% off. Or you can choose to have a one-to-one with me. Please see my testimonials below. So here we have it. We have a penumbral lunar eclipse in the sign of Capricorn. Now, for the basis of this exercise, my chart is on the 5th of July based on 5:44 a.m. Now, if that's slightly different to any other videos you watch, it's simply because my software is taking into account summertime slightly differently. The more official time is 4:44 a.m. Now, this eclipse is part of Saros 149. So this is a new series, and it's a thunder moon traditionally in native Indian culture. And also it's known as a half-blood moon because it's not actually going to be very visible for very long to many people. There's going to be some folks in Portugal, Spain, North Africa, all of South America, and some of Northern America that will get a brief glimpse of this eclipse. Now, as usual, I've erected the chart which enables us to have an ascendant. And the ascendant is at 22 degrees in Cancer. And of course the Sun is in Cancer too, along with Mercury. So Cancer energy is very much about nurture. It's about shelter. It's about security. It's about love and affection expressed in a very warm way because, of course, its ruling planet is the moon. So by having the moon here in the sign of Capricorn, we're putting the moon opposite where it's at its best. So this is not the best place for the moon. But this moon is also in a very positive angle to Uranus, the planet of innovation, which is in the part of this chart known as the 11th house, which is person kind. Also, the Sun is forging a gorgeous angle to Ceres, which is to do with nurture, it's to do with nature, it's to do with agriculture as well, and it's in the 9th house. So hopefully this more caring dynamic of the Sun being in the sign of Cancer can see better distribution of medicines or food, particularly to less developed economies in the world. But we've also got a cluster of energy in the 7th house, which is very much about relating, but it can be about open enemies. And having Pluto and Jupiter so closely together, they come into an exact conjunction on the 10th of July, is going to be fascinating to see what develops in terms of COVID. Now, because these are in the 7th house of this chart, it means that we've got Pluto opposite the ascendant. Now, someone's going to stand up for their interests above the collective on the back of that particular aspect. There's no doubt about it. Jupiter opposite the ascendant is much more positive, but someone could take a very proud or bombastic approach to how they might interact with others. Neptune could soften it because it's on the 10th house of world affairs, but I think because the North Node, which is the societal direction of traffic, is locked away in this 12th solar house along with the Sun and Mercury, suggests there's going to be quite a lot of psychological energy shifting off the back of this particular lunar eclipse, and that could be a degree of anxiety or fear. And this North Node is in a quincunx with Saturn, 150 degrees, suggesting that if we don't get the information from leaders, from governments, in a clear and trustworthy way, it could create distress. It may have been creating that kind of impression where you're located. There are certain places where the leadership has been crystal clear, and that's created confidence. Now, the other thing that's remarkable about this particular eclipse is that it's exactly opposite the start point of the United States of America, which is conjunct Sirius, the brightest fixed star in the sky. Now, Sirius is said to be our soul sun, if you like, our soul centre. So it's a very powerful location. If your birthday is on the 5th, 6th or 7th of July, or you have your midpoint between the Sun and the Moon there, or you have your ascendant, or you have your midheaven, or even the Moon on that point at 13, 14 degrees Cancer, it gives you a magnificence. You have to use it wisely, of course, but it gives you the prospect to really prosper. Fortunately, my goddaughter Tilly has that placement. She's born on the 6th. But because we've got all this 12th house energy here, and the Moon is opposite Sirius, and the Moon is therefore opposite where it's dignified in the sign of Cancer, we have got a potential challenge coming here. Because the 12th house can also be where things are not contained. It is very Neptunian and Jupiterian because it's got a Pisces vibe. So it's about things becoming gaseous and expanding, but not necessarily in a tangible way. So balancing the more practical elements of our situations at the moment in terms of jobs, our life structure, feeling organised and knowing where we stand against the swirling mist of uncertainty, particularly with Mercury not at its best in Cancer and in retrograde, but also forging a square with Mars as it does or did for the last 10 days of June and into this early part of July. What that's doing is creating a potential tension, so we may find ourselves on edge. Now, there are some really good things in this chart. I mean, Mars is forging a brilliant angle to Venus. So if you're in a location where you are able to socially integrate and connect with people on a physical basis, that's going to obviously lift people's spirits. We've also got this potential for innovation with Uranus, and that ability to try to find ways of being more connected to the wider society that we're all part of. But I think Sirius is the big player here. So for the United States in particular, I think that this full moon, this lunar eclipse, is quite challenging. I can only be truthful. It could be in terms of more health and welfare rather than just neat finance. I think the inevitable reality is, particularly when Mars continues its journey through the sign of Aries and all of August, all of September, half of October, and towards the end of this year, is going to go into negative angles with Saturn, Jupiter and Pluto. So I think there is a potential for COVID-19 to really gain traction again, or the economic fallout from its effects by us not being very ready for it in the first place or not responding quickly enough could be felt very keenly. There's also a lovely or interesting opposition between Chiron, the wounded healer, and Juno. So with all this 12th house energy in the rather nostalgic and emotional sign of Cancer, it's possible that somebody could be in touch who's been out of touch, but there could be a decision to be made. If someone's wounded us in the past, whether we want to let it go and let it be healed is really a very personal decision. But that's the impact of this particular event. We can see that Sirius, this marvellously sparkling bright star, which is known to be to do with dogs as well, and it's canine major is its Latin term, I think. But this is a very important event, I think, for the United States in particular, but I think for all of us, particularly as this chart is based on the United Kingdom, essentially. I think it's what's going on behind the obvious that we need to be conscious of, and not to be too persuaded by anyone's bombast in what they're trying to convince us of. I think that's a very important thing to remember. Now, please stay with me, because I'm now going to go through each of the zodiac signs to outline exactly how this is going to impact upon you. Hello, Aries. Well, with Mars back in your zodiac sign through to next January, you've got an opportunity to really take on life and be much more invigorated, much more motivated, and that beautiful link to Venus is certainly going to give you lots of pull-in power. And for the rest of this month, Aries, you're really going to be able to strut your stuff in quite a big way, and that can draw someone to you. But I think what you've learned, particularly as this year has gone on, is about coming to terms with the part of your nature that is more vulnerable, that is more sensitive. And the lesson that you've gained from that is not to go against your inner sixth sense, because once you do, that's when things can go awry for you. So this is a particular case in point for you. This particular chart gives you a real desire perhaps to be much more prominent and successful in your career, but I wouldn't, around your career or around your love life or around any situation in your life, go against what feels comfortable for you at an emotional level. So that part of you that can be quite risk-taking and also, make very bold and courageous moves at times. Don't lose that, but at the same time stay very closely allied to how you feel about things. Now, Taurus, having the lunar eclipse in your 9th solar house, is very much about switching things up. It's about variety. Now, of course, it's not been so easy to do that in the lockdown because we've had to stay pretty close to home, many of us. But perhaps during that period of time, you've been developing new interests, new approaches, bringing a variety to your thinking, which has actually been very, very positive for you. But there may be something that you're wanting to change around your world at the present time that someone close to you could actually be resisting. Or is there someone from your past who's really calling out to you in quite a deep way, deep down within your soul, and it could be around a romantic or sexual attraction with someone, and it may be hard not to think about this person or even to search social media to see how they're doing, or perhaps you're going to be tempted to reach out. If you are tempted to reach out, then there is the potential to clear the air. But to do so, handling the more forceful energies of Pluto's combination with Jupiter is going to take a lot of patience and tact. It may mean accepting that neither side will want to accept total responsibility, and you may have to agree to disagree. But if you can stay as open-minded as possible, it's certainly going to help you for the duration of this eclipse. Now, Gemini, it's wonderful having Venus no longer in retrograde in your sign, and with Mars now in your sector of friendship and fraternity right through to the end of this year. I think there's going to be quite a shake-up around who you spend time with, and also around some of your longer term plans. But however idealistic you may want to be, very often life does come down to pounds, shillings and pence, which was the old currency when I grew up. I think it changed when I was about 13 to decimal. So you get my drift though. however idealistic you would like to be, how do things work out for you in a more practical context? You know, do you have the earnings, the income, the resources to fund your life on a wider basis? So I think this month is going to see you very active in that regard. And if that's the case, you can use your ingenuity, your creativity, and your imagination to great effect. Now, Cancer, having a lunar eclipse in your opposite sign definitely flags up relationship issues. And this chart particularly because of that gathering of energy, which included Saturn, Jupiter and Pluto all in your 7th house, even on the basis of the day chart itself. So relationships are a big part of this period of time. Now, relationships can take lots of different guises. It can be with our relationship with the world, or relationship to ourselves, or relationship to our neighbours. It can be to a partner. If we're single, it can be to someone we'd like to be involved with. If we are involved, but it's not quite what we want, then that may be where the rub is. So wherever we come into contact with others is where the greatest amount of activity will lie for you. But with Mars really high in the sky, the trick for you is to marshal your extra confidence and extra assertiveness, but not in the way that you're trying to dominate proceedings, because Pluto in your 7th solar house could go against you if you want to relate, but a little bit too much on your terms. So it's like trying to find the middle ground, if you can, between the axis of the two polar ends of the moon and the sun. Then you're finding a perfect balance to operate your relationships from. Now, Leo, having this eclipse in your 6th house of life organization, work, anything to do with appointments, fitness, diet, nutrition, is really quite telling. But you know, if you are feeling a little bit below par, or there's some kind of information that seems to be just pecking away at your head and getting under your skin a little bit, it wouldn't be a surprise with Mars squaring up with Mercury. And with Mercury tracking backwards in your 12th house, it may feel that other people are scorning you a little bit. They're not quite honouring the majesty of your sign in the way that you would like. But all of this is a period of pause before the sun makes its way into your sign and you start to go forwards in a more progressive way. Generally, the stars are still asking you to find a balance between what you want to commit to others and what you need to do for yourself. But I think this eclipse generally does point towards a degree of careful thought, consideration, perhaps even meditation, in order to come to the exact place you want to be. Now, Virgo, with your ruling planet Mercury in retrograde, that's not terribly helpful. But you do have a big posse of planets in your 5th house of exuberance, of warmth, of self-expression. But the fixed star of Sirius is combining with the sun in the part of your scope to do with your future and also your general friendships and social interactions. Perhaps of all the zodiac signs, you're going to want to have the most fun. But there's another part of you that can be deeply conscientious and aware of what individual behaviour or how individual behaviour impacts on others. I think Mars is in a very lusty part of your situation, and it is linking with Venus, which is right at the top of your scope. Don't be surprised, therefore, if there is some kind of romantic overture that comes through someone that you're connected with. But if your time management needs some attention, or you're spreading yourself too thinly to try to please too many people too much of the time, it's time to bring the energy back to you, the centre, and decide where you're really going to invest of yourself. Now, Libra, having Mars in your opposite sign through to the 6th of January definitely gives you a lot more firmness and a lot more desire to take on challenges. And it's linked to your ruler is definitely potentially flirty. So if you're single, it could be someone from a little bit of a different background who takes your fancy over this eclipse period, not least someone you encounter at work. But remember that club of planets, all in the sign of Capricorn, have constantly reminded you since 2008, when Pluto entered there, that it must feel right. The security side of it has to work for you, however much you'd like to be more flamboyant. So even if you want to push forwards in your career, for example, if this means that you're doing something which takes you away from your home base, or doesn't feel very comfortable at an emotional level, or doesn't really drive you, it's just the status, then you may need to think again on the back of this particular eclipse. Having standing and admiration at one level is a pretty empty experience if you don't have affection, love and support at a much deeper one. Now Scorpio, this is all about communications for you. But it's communications not necessarily in terms of the big ideas we have, or the philosophies we have, or how we might want to talk about the big issues of the day. It's about joining it together to how you really feel, which is what the moon's about. If you're manifesting ideas for the longer term that can see you expanding your horizons, but it works for you at an emotional level, then that's great. However, your ruler Mars is in a very hard-working location, and it's linked to Venus, suggests you could do well financially throughout July, but you need to get your tactics right. And if there's anything of a legalistic nature or anything to do with technology, particularly with Mercury twisting backwards, or you're wanting to travel anywhere further afield, or there's anything to do with paperwork or an application, you absolutely need to watch it like a proverbial hawk. Now, Sagittarius, this eclipse occurs in the part of your situation to do with your everyday resources, which of course Saturn has just returned to. Now Saturn may have been bringing you some quite challenging lessons over the last 2.25 years, and there can be more to come between now and December the 16th. But I want you to remember what you've learned in that time. And perhaps part of the lesson has been to embrace that more philosophical side of your nature. And if some strands of a more monetary variety have dried up, it's just given you a push to be more inventive with the more dramatic and outgoing part of your nature, to regenerate in a different, more imaginative way. So this eclipse, particularly with Mars in a fantastic location for you, linking brilliantly with Venus, the North Node evoking your sector of relating as well, suggests that if you can use the extra drive that Mars will give you in the last half of this year, and take into account a need to balance the more imaginative schemes you have with a real slice of realism, then this can be an opportunity to continue to make progress. Now Capricorn, this eclipse obviously occurs in your sign, and therefore that's all about the individual. But you also now have Saturn, your ruler, back in your sign of individuality. But the sun on the other side of the heavens, as it sparkles with Sirius, that most bright star, is all about relating. So how do you find the balance, particularly with Mars now in a very forceful part of your situation with regard to your more emotional responses? Well, the trick is going to be through patience. Having the eclipse in your own sign could make you jump to conclusions. It's possible, particularly around relationship matters, and of course with Mercury still retrograde. The key here is to try to keep a sense of detachment, but at the same time not give up on the things you want to achieve as an individual. That doesn't mean that you should let these go because others don't necessarily get what you're trying to achieve, but it does mean fine-tuning your ambition and desire with an understanding of what others need from you too. So you can be single-minded, but the way you explain it to others or interact with others needs to take into account their situations as well. Now Aquarius, lovely to have you with me here, a fellow Aquarius. Now having Mars in Aries, it's tremendous. It's all about quick wits, and having Venus going forwards in the sparkly Gemini, the 5th house of romance and fun. Is it going to be an opportunity to go out and play? Well, I hope so. It's really lovely to go and meet up with people and have lots of nice chats and warmth and mirth and merriment, for sure. But this chart is about taking care of basics, and some of that could be in a more protective sense, particularly with Saturn, your co-ruler, back in the 12th solar house, where it can be quite tricky. And of course Jupiter and Pluto are there, but I do feel some kind of evolution is going on deep within you that's so meaningful, but it could be informing your decisions around work, health, practicalities like never before. And it's important to listen to your instincts, but not to become overwhelmed by your fears. If you can find the balance between the two, you're absolutely buzzing. Now, Pisces, with Neptune, your ruler, right at the top of that event chart on the 10th house, and your other ruler, Jupiter, in such a magnificent location, it's possible for you to move forwards productively without question. Of course, the Sun, and therefore the star, which is Sirius, is in that part of your scope to do with how you can engage and amaze and shock and awe. It's about romance, it's about showing off and drawing goodness to you. But the moon is in your sector of friendship, which has been a bit of a rough hoe over the last couple of years. There may have been people that once seemed to be incredibly important who've gone out of your life, and there may need to be new associations that are building. If that is the case, try to be philosophical about it. Mars has given you a lot of push to improve your finances from here on in, and actually its link with Venus can see you making some changes to where you live. But Mars' right angle to Mercury just suggests not to be too free and easy or too impulsive about your resources, because you may end up with a case of buyer's remorse. But generally speaking, in terms of the bigger picture, from now until the end of the year, it's about your long term that you now need to set your sights upon, and see this particular period of time as where you more attune your creative output to achieve that longer term benefit. It's been a real pleasure being with you, and just to say again, I'd be delighted if you would subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to join Elisa and I for that daily astrology and tarot show, please see the links below, or join me on Twitter at HoroscopeAce. Thank you so much, good luck, stay safe, take care, and goodbye.